Okay, so it's the month of December, which means it's time for these Christmas tutorials, specifically Christmas wreaths, or I guess they could be for any holiday. Basically, a shape made out of pine needles. It's going to be completely procedural. We can make it into any form, and you can see here we have a basic setup where we have kind of a circular wreath, kind of the standard vanilla porn section of the wreaths, right? We can change kind of the seed value to get different forms and different pine distributions. And also I made a simple control for what number of sides this polygon has. So if you're interested in learning how to do this, let's fucking do it. Okay, so make sure you have the newest version of Blender. I'm using Blender 3.1 Alpha. If you are not using one of the newer version, you might be missing some of the nodes I'm using here. So all geo nodes, select the cube, go to geometry nodes, make a geo nodes tree. If you haven't used geometry nodes before, God rest your soul, because this is going to be a lot. So first thing we got to do is we got to make a pine needle, and we need to distribute it over the surface of our shape. Now, in our case, we're just going to be making kind of the simple torus kind of reef, but you could do any shape. So since I want this to be procedural fully, I don't want to actually use this. I don't even know if there is an option for this. Is there a donut or a torus option? No. Either way, we're going to make it out of a curve. So I'm going to use a curved circle just to kind of outline what the shape will look like. So you have to imagine this has thickness. And then to actually give this thickness, all we're going to do is we are going to use a curve to mesh. I always forget which one this is. Curve to mesh. So we have a curved circle. Now it's a mesh with vertices, but to actually give it thickness, I'm just going to use another curved circle, plug it in there. And you can see, now we can control the thickness of it, the radius, but also the outwards radius. So we call that, I don't know, one of these we call inner and one of these we call outer radii. I don't know which is which. But the advantage of doing it this way, instead of just using like a donut or a torus primitive, is we can actually add a bit of variety to this. So if you can imagine that we have this circle, this curved circle sweeping around this one, well, we can actually change the properties of this one to get cooler results. So I'm actually going to set radius. So set curve radius. And you can see this is actually going to basically scale up our thickness. But if we do something random, since this actually has a field input, that's what this diamond means, we can use a noise texture to give this thing variable thickness. I want some areas to be kind of more lush, more voluptuous, if you will, than some of the other areas. And noise texture gives us a noise value that goes around here. So I'm going to bring down the resolution of this, or kind of the variability, and bring down the detail. And I also don't want it, I want on average for this to be thicker, so I'm just going to send it through a map range that's going to, on average, push these values up. So instead of 0 to 1, we're going to send these to, I don't know, or the original radius was 1. So let's send it to, I don't know, something like 0.75 to 1. So I'll put in 0.75 here. So it can either be full radius or 75%. So you can see there's a tiny bit of variability here. And if we add in a seed value, you can see we can change that. In fact, let's first of all make this look a bit smoother. And let's actually bring this down so we have even a bit more variability. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the seed value and kind of outsource it here so we can control this and any other randomization that we're going to do. And believe me, we are. Let's call this Christmas Tut 1. Okay. So this is basically the node network to make our kind of deformed torus. The next order of business is we got to make a pine needle that gets distributed on here. So let's make a fully procedural pine needle. To do this, you kind of want to imagine that it's kind of like this stick or a twig with leaves coming out of it. So starting off with the stick, I'm going to just use a cylinder. There's, I guess, a couple ways to do this, but cylinder is probably the most obvious. We don't need the top and bottom of these, since I don't want to, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but I just want to generate things coming out of the middle. So I'm just going to set this to none and bring the radius down quite a bit until it's a very thin twig. We want to distribute leaves on this. So first of all, let's say where we want to distribute this. So points on faces. Let's increase these. So the way you want to think about this is each one of these points, am I saying that? Why am I tripping on this? Every single one of these points is going to have a leaf distributed on it. For the leaf, we're just going to keep it simple. We're just going to use a plane, kind of like a grid object, but it will look good once we actually do it. So we have our points, so let's instance on those points. So again, we have a cylinder, generated some points, and on each of these points, we're going to instance a grid. To make this look, by the way, we want to make sure we realize these instances at the end so it's actual geometry. But to make it look better, we should first of all make them thinner leaves. And second of all, you can see they're all kind of coming out with the same orientation or rotation, so we need to randomize this a bit. Easy way to do this is we can actually start with the rotation of these points, so it's going to give us kind of the normal, kind of like the outward facing direction. So I believe if we just try to plug this in, I don't think it will work. It will give us some nice randomization, but you can see, I mean, I guess this would work, but if you want to do this properly, I think we got to send it through a align Euler to vector. Let's see, set this to Z, before, after, yeah. So you can see here they were coming out randomly. However, they were all kind of pointed upwards. This align Euler to vector is just going to make them all flat. And you can see it's starting to look a bit like a pine needle. We could do a bit better, so let's increase the density until I'm happy with it. So I think 500 is plenty, and to make it look more full, I want some of these to be pointing up, some of them to be pointing down. So I'm just going to vector math, add a vector, and so Z is just going to rotate them. X and Y should be what we want. So a little bit of this and a little bit of that. In fact, what we could do is we could randomize this. So let's just do that. Random value. So I want each of these to be added a random vector. So that's why I'm doing this. Random vector, and then we can actually use this value node from before, which was the seed of our torus, also here. So now this is going to randomize everything, as you can see. So that looks pretty good. If we want to have a bit more control over this, like the amount of randomness, I mean, we could use a scale node, or I guess we could just bring this down here. So let's just do it like that. Okay, we might go back to this, but here is our basic pine needle that we are going to be repeating. And also we can bring down the scale of these leaves if we want to. But okay, so far what do we have? We have the pine needle and we have the torus. And what we want to do, instance the pine needle on the torus. And you might think, oh, how are we going to get something good out of this thing and a basic torus? Right? But once we add these two together, you're going to see the crazy amount of detail we can get quickly. So just like before, we are going to distribute points on our torus. I always try to Control-Shift-Click to view it, but you have to actually connect it. So we're going to generate points. I'm just going to generate them randomly. We might up the density, and just like last time, we want to instance what? The pine needle in this case. So we're going to instance on points, and then you make sure you realize instances here. If you don't do it, it's not going to work. So here's without. I guess it does work. That is interesting. Either way, you can see that it's done it. It doesn't look very good, but it has done it, and it's actually the same issue as before with orientation. So I believe we just plug rotation into rotation, and yeah, you've basically made a bird's nest. Let's take the scale of these down until, there we go, until it's a bit more visible. So this orientation trick should help. I think another thing is let's try the Euler, align Euler to vector. If it helps, it helps. If it doesn't, it doesn't. You could just try all of these. So here's without, here's with. I do believe that helps. I want to have way more instances until this looks nice and thick. In fact, at this point, let's just view this with cycles since we'll have all the nice shadowing. Yeah, now it's starting to look good. Okay, so this is the base. We want to fix this a bit because it looks kind of, I don't know, kind of boring. So again, the way to do this, as with everything, is a bit of randomization. So we're going to randomize the scale. So all of these pine needles are the same size right now. I want some of them to be big, some of them to be small. So we'll have the biggest be 20% and the smallest be 10%. So already that adds a good amount of variety. I'm trying to see, do we want this or not? I believe we do. I think that does help the look of it a bit more. Okay, so we're going to do it like that. At this point, I want to set up some basic lighting so we can actually see what we're working with. HDRI. There we go. And at this point, we're going to hone in the look a little. So first thing I want to do is I want to up the number of points just to make it look nice and thick and lush. And I think just like last time, we want to randomize the... You know what? We could just fully randomize it. You know what? That's what we're going to do. We're going to fully randomize the rotation. So we're going to do a vector math. No, we're going to do a randomize. What am I doing? Random value. So this is just going to be, it could be pointed any which way, I believe. So rotation, randomize the vector, and it can go from this to 2 times pi, and connect that to rotation. There we go. Now it's looking nice and varied up. In fact, I want these to be a bit smaller. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the look of this. Again, all we've done is like make a pine thing, make a circle, proceduralize all this. But I guess one thing we should do is anywhere where we see a seed value, we're just going to connect this. So we have one parameter that controls everything, which should be nice and convenient. Do we have any other randoms? We do have this one. And let's see what that looks like. So we change it. It's not only going to change the general donut shape, but it's also going to re-instance those points. It's going to shuffle the size and a couple other things. But notice that since this whole thing's procedural, we can always go back to any part of this, like the initial donut generation, and get a triangular wreath. Like the whole logic makes sense, and you can just keep going like this. So we can control that. We can control the radius. We can also control like the average radius, like how much variability we get. Additionally, all these instancing options. Now, if we don't realize instances, doesn't seem to do much. But we can change how many leaves are on each of these, etc. And now let's just make a basic material for this, because it already looks pretty good. It just needs to look kind of like pine or grass or whatever. To do this, just like always, in this case, I don't believe we do need to realize instances, since I'm just going to set a basic material everywhere. I don't need it to look different or anything, although that would be cool. But for this, I'm just going to set material. We're going to use our basic material, and let's just make a simple grass kind of leaf shader. Here's the basic way everybody does it. You take a translucent BSDF, you connect it, and you make it, the color of your thing, so kind of greenish, kind of dark, something like that you can pick. You take it, and then you mix it with not a translucent, but a transparent BSDF. You mix those two together. That's just going to make it partly see-through, partly translucent. So you can see we have both of those. And you just want to hone in the color and the look, depending on what you're going for. Maybe a bit of a yellowish. And there you go. So again, really, the parameters that matter are this seed one, this resolution, and by the way, there's no reason we can't swap out the curve primitive. So let's try, we could do a Bezier segment. And now you can see we have a wreath that goes along the flow of this, or even cooler, let's do the star. It's probably a good example. You can see how this very simple node network gives us quite a few possibilities. So let's increase this. You can change the shape of the star, whatever. You get the point. So that's it for the wreath tutorial. I guess maybe I'll do a part 2 about adding in ornaments and stuff like that, just to kind of complete this. But that's the general thing. Hopefully you learned something. Oh, by the way, if you enjoyed this tutorial and want access to a bunch of stuff, Patreon, it exists. There's somewhere between 6 and 7 and 800. I never know the exact number, and it changes at the end of the month. Active patrons that are getting access to tutorials early access to tutorials. You could have seen this a day early. Also exclusive tutorials. I recently did a long tutorial about that face opening effect from the CG Matter headache video. And in general, the Patreon funds both this channel and the CG Matter channel. So if you want to do that, if you want to support both those channels and me, or you just want the benefits like the blend files, all this, I'll make this a blend file, etc. That is the place to get it. So thank you, every single patron. You guys are making it possible, and hopefully you learned something. That's it.